What's going on, Yow? Yow.
I had surgery. Hey everybody, Pastor Mike here from our home on the range. Sweetie Pie had surgery Thursday morning, pretty early, and so I've been taking care of her the last few days. And she's doing well. She's sore, resting, and so we appreciate everybody's prayers and your understanding. This is another surgery related to her cancer from a few years back. She's not had any signs of any cancer since then. We are very, very thankful for that. So anyway, a new video came out. Let me go back. I gotta throw in this note, or I'll forget it. And I've got my fun hat on today for a reason. A video came up in my feed this morning from YouTube, and it was a series that the BBC, I think, had done on the Israeli spy agency Mossad. And so that looked interesting to me. So I pulled it up, and of course they're going to give background on Israel as a nation, as a state, as a legally recognized state on this earth, which came about in 1947. The United Nations took a vote to partition or repartition this area of land between the Mediterranean and the Dead Sea and the Jordan River that was called Palestine. It previously was, that whole area was under British protection. It was a protectorate of the British Empire. But if I remember right, 1917, the Balfour Declaration basically lifted that area out from underneath the being part of the Commonwealth or the protectorate of the United Kingdom. In other words, the Brits had Palestine for years. They ruled over it. They were the law. They enforced laws, whatever. And then in the Balfour Declaration, they took it off and just let them be whatever they want to be. So, in 1947, the United Nations took a vote. Now, I knew this part, to partition this area of Palestine and give those people, those Arab people referred to as Palestinians, a portion of it and give the rest to the Jews, the people of Israel, the 12 tribes, as a homeland. They said, we just about got slaughtered completely in the Holocaust. So we're not going to do that again. We need a place to call our own. And so they did. And then the documentary went on to talk about how soon after they formed as a nation, they got in the intelligence business because they said, we're not going to let this happen again. Nobody's going to slip up behind our backs and just kill us and try to wipe us off the map. And if you've lived in this century, in the last century, then you know that there's hardly been a year that goes by that some Arab nation doesn't want to try its hand at getting rid of Israel. And I don't care what your views are. I really don't. When God made a promise to Abram, it's a promise he intended to keep. He said, I will bless them that bless thee, and I will curse him
He's
that
talking
curse
about other
thee.
people too,
And
not just
I
Israel.
don't curse Israel by saying, I am Israel now. I've replaced Israel. God's not going to deal with the Jews anymore. I don't do that. Anyway, getting back to that vote, to me this is significant, and I don't know why I never caught this before. I can't remember if I've ever heard it before and just dismissed it. I don't think it's in any of my notes anywhere. Take a guess at the number of people that voted in the United Nations at that time to give that land to Israel. Setting up, then the next year, 1948, Israel declares itself a state, a nation. 33 was the number. And I'm going,
Dun, dun,
oh,
dun.
that's got to be significant. It does. And I'm not prepared to go all into it. But are you kidding me? 33 men basically voted to give life to a Israel state. And the most famous 33 Jewish person in the world was Jesus Christ. Okay? So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out to you. I shared it with a couple guys this morning, so you're not the first to hear about it. You're the second. But it was to me pretty interesting. Then we hear that Pope Benedict is now officially paying for all of his sins and his crimes and all of the idolatry. I'm not trying to be mean, but God's word is God's word. The rule book is the rule book. God did not say you can't make images and idols unless
it's raining.
they're blessed by the Pope and they're an actual. I got to thinking about this the other day. What is it? And I know the answer to this, but what is it that makes a church an official Catholic church? Can you get a shed and move into it and set benches and add things up and say this is a Catholic church? No, there's rules in the Catholic canon of laws. There's rules on what designates a certain piece of real estate on this earth as a Catholic church. And one thing in particular is the presence in the form of statues of a statue of Mary, a statue of Joseph, and a crucifix with Jesus hanging on it, which to me is an abomination because it says that our Lord is still suffering, and that is a total contradiction of Scripture. Read Hebrews, read the whole book. Why not? But read Hebrews, because it clearly says Christ has done suffering. He only had to suffer once, and those priests in every Catholic church doing masses 1, 2, sometimes 3 times a day, killing Christ over again, causing him to suffer all over again for sins that he's already suffered for that he didn't commit. So to me, but anyway, I got to thinking about this. There was one thing that God said to Israel in the Old Testament. He said, I'm paraphrasing, but I think this is in Deuteronomy. He said, remember the day that I met with you at Mount Sinai, which is
3, 4,
Exodus 19, Exodus 20, and all throughout 20 and 30 and 32, Exodus 32, 33, and 34.
40.
Finally, Moses comes down from the mountain the second time with the copy of the Ten Commandments, and God said, during all that time, did you ever see me? No. You heard my voice, you saw the fire, you saw the smoke, you heard the trumpets, but you didn't see me. So you can't carve an image, you can't make a painting, you can't draw a picture I look like, so therefore you really can't make an image of me and say it's me, because it's not. Because I haven't shown my face to anybody.
1,000, 2,
And
1,000, 3, 1,000,
you know, we
4,
all have
1,000,
this
5, 1,000, 6.
Western idea of what we think Jesus looked like. You know, this soft, long, brownish hair, beautiful, adoring face, and you know, on the old hymn books. That's probably not what he looked like, but we don't know. So you show me a carved image of a guy hanging from a cross, and I'm supposed to say that that's Christ. But how can I? When there were other people in the Roman Empire that were killed in that exact same way. Why couldn't that guy up there on the cross be one of the thieves on the cross? Okay. We didn't know what they looked like either. So the presence of the statue of Joseph, the statue of Mary, and the crucifix has to be in this building to even consider it to be a Catholic church. It has to have the presence of the Eucharist in it, which is the wafer. That's Christ to them. And I know that because there was a church that shut down or something like that. I was reading something, and they were going to fire the priest. Well, when they fired the priest, he grabbed the Eucharist that was in the chapel and took it with him, removing the blessing of that church. In other words, they can't have church there because they lost their Jesus. He's not there anymore. I mean, this is silly rules, but it's their rules. They're the ones that made them up. God didn't make them up. But anyway, my point is, that statue of Joseph, they would point to that and say, that's Joseph. How? How is it Joseph? Let's say that statue is made out of wood, it's carved wood, or let's say it's ceramic of some kind, or let's say it's stone of some kind that was poured into a mold which is like a molten image. It was poured into a mold and set and painted, or it was carved out of rock or marble and decorated, or it was made out of wood and carved and overlaid and painted, and so on and so on and so on. But the idea is, you say that's Joseph, and I say, no, that's a stick of wood that you put the name of Joseph on there, but it's not Joseph. You point to this commonly held vision of the Virgin Mary with this white tunic on and this light blue, sky blue robe on. She's the Queen of Heaven, so she's going to wear sky blue on her, and point to that idol and say, that's Mary. And I say, no, it's not. It's a piece of stone that somebody dug up out of a quarry. Some guy carved on it. Some guy painted on it. You hung it up there. You're trying to tell me it's Mary, but I'm telling you it's a rock. Is all it is.
Oh no, fuck you,
don't even
Weezy.
get started again on the crucifix. So try to convince me in a way that makes sense that when I walk in, let's say I'm going to convert to Catholicism. You want to convert me? Try to explain to me in a way that makes biblical sense how those statues there are going to cause me now to venerate. They remove themselves from, well, we don't worship idols. We venerate them. Okay, let's see. So you go in, the first thing you do when you walk into the Catholic Church is you bow. Bowing to what? The idols up on the stage. And you genuflect, you cross yourself, you get the holy water. What made that water holy? It's been sitting there all week, getting tepid. It's got flies that landed on it. It's got dust on it. What makes that water holy? It was blessed by the Pope in 1,000-gallon drums at the Vatican, at Easter, I think is how it works. I think that's how it is. The Pope blesses a mass amount of water by saying magic Latin words and crossing this and sprinkling um, sprinkling holy water on that, I guess, incense, and now the water is holy, and you have to dip your fingers in there and do this. Now you're holy for how long? Because that water doesn't let. Apparently, you got to do it again every time you walk into the church. You got to holy yourself with that magic water. It doesn't make sense. None of it does. That's a bowl of water. That's a stick that has a face card on it that you say is Joseph. There are no pictures in my Bible. None. So I can't know what Joseph looked like. I can't know what Mary looked like. I can't know what Jesus looked like.
I love the ones on Far Cry 5 though.
Just putting the names on there.
Silver bars.
I mean, because I know what they did in Rome. They had the statue of Saturn. They had the statue of Apollo. They had the statue of Zeus. They had the statue of Athena. And the statue of Persephone. And all these goddesses. And the statue of Diana in Ephesus. And when Constantine became a Christian, you know, they pried the nameplates off the statue and made new nameplates. This is Paul. Okay? This is Peter over here. And that's the Virgin Mary instead of the fertility goddess. Okay? Now she's anti-fertility somehow, somewhere. It just doesn't make sense. And so Pope Benedict passed away. And 95 years old, and to me it'd be horrible to follow Catholicism all your life, and that's what he did. He followed Catholicism all his life. And last night, while you were asleep, he went to stand before God with the real Jesus sitting at the right hand of the Father, and he saw who the real Holy Father was, and it wasn't Benedict. It wasn't Joseph Ratzinger. Hired. It wasn't him. Now, I'd say pray for his family, but I don't know if he has any kids. Because we don't know. A new video came out. And I don't know if I was anticipating this one, but it came out last week, a couple weeks ago, something like that. It's a part of a series of videos done by a man by the name of David Paulides. Now, when you look at his name on a website or YouTube or the book that he wrote, it looks like, I couldn't figure out if it was Paul Ides or Paulides. It's Paulides. Then I watched some of the videos, and it's David Paulides. He was a Southern California cop and a detective for years. He did police work, knew how to do investigations and so on. And he's, for somehow, some way, he got interested in cases of missing people at national parks all over the country. And he started getting case information. And he was appalled that it didn't, not only did he find out that the National Park Service, which is under the Department of Interior, they don't have statistics on how many people end up missing in national parks across the country. It seems like that would be somebody's job in the Department of Interior. There's a bureaucrat somewhere who sits at a desk, and I'm pretty sure he's supposed to keep track of that, and apparently they're saying nobody keeps track of it because nobody has a number for anybody. But number one, not only was he not getting any statistics on missing people in national parks, it seems like he was
And go get some more gold. I love gold in this game.
Interfered
with this texture pack. Oh my
his
god.
investigations.
Ugh.
Like, go find something else to do. struck me, the books he's written, they're called Missing 411. 411 is the code in America. If you dial 411, you get
Information.
the phone company information service. Hello, information. Yeah, can you find me the number of a guy named Chuck in Pennsylvania? And that's what that's for. So it's Missing 411, missing information. And it focuses on these people that, and there's a couple cases I'll point out to you, that their story of how they went missing, and in some cases, no evidence was found whatsoever. And I don't mean little evidence, I mean no evidence. Other than there's a person now that nobody in the world can account for. There's a missing person. Or there are cases where remains have showed up in scattered places in areas that were already searched thoroughly in. And none of that makes any sense. How can you search in an area? And if you know how they do grid searches, you've probably seen them on the news and whatever. The people line up probably about 10 feet apart. They say if you can't see the person next to you, if you can't see their ankles, you're too far away from them. And they do. They get a string and they make a grid in an area around where the person was last seen, and they start doing a grid search. Let's look for evidence. Let's look for his hat or their clothes or their shoes or some blood or a body or the kid, lying up, holding a squirrel, whatever. There's been children got lost in the forest and found. There was a case here a few years ago down south of here where a guy found a kid that had ended up missing, and after like 3 or 4 days, I think it was a dog that he had, he was a little kid, but he was alive. So anyway, one of the cases that to me was interesting was there was a little boy named Dior Kunz, and he
Watch your mouth.
Let's see, July 10th, 2015, in Idaho, at a national forest called Salmon Chalice National Forest. Now, the town that's next to is a little town called Leadore, Idaho. Leadore, so you can imagine at one time it was an old mining town, and now it's not much of anything. But there's a town there, and you might get a phone signal if you're lucky. And literally, as you drive into town, you drive through town. There's only like 105 people in town. You drive through town, and if you stay on that road, you go right from a paved road to a gravel road, straight. The gravel road then turns into a rocky road. You can only do about 5 miles an hour, and then the road ends. That's the end of the world right there. Hey, if you ever wondered where a highway ends, go to Leadore, Idaho, because the end of the world is right there. It literally does stop in this national forest at a campsite. And when I say campsite, we're not talking about big RVs and stuff like that. There's no water, there's no electric, you're roughing it. But there's we're not talking about big RVs and stuff like that. There's no water, there's no electric, you're roughing it. But there's a nice little creek out there, Clearwater Creek, snow runoff and stuff like that. There's fish in it, things to do. So this family, man and his fiance, and the boy's not quite 3 years old.
Oh, this is crazy.
And so he has to be watched. Okay? Somebody that's 3 years old, you have to watch them. And they did. But the story was that the dad, he's a young man, he caught some fish and came back to the camp and said, look at all these fish I caught. And they go, no way, you didn't catch those. Show us where. So I think it was his mom and dad that walked up there with him. and his fiance walking behind that group, and little Dior, they called him Little Man, he's walking with his mom, and he gets a little ways up toward where they're going to go to the creek, and he says, I don't want to go. So he turns around, and Mom says, well, go back to Grandpa at the campsite. So apparently it was her grandpa, maybe, but the child knew him. So she kept turning around to make sure that he was walking into the camp and into the knowledge and presence of his grandfather, who was sitting, just at the campsite. It's daytime, around the fire, and the little boy's just going to play around there. So they go up there for a while, not 10, 15 minutes, and come back because they found minnows, and the little kid likes to play with minnows and bugs and worms. So they were going to go get him and let him try to catch minnows. Well, they get to campsite and they ask Grandpa, where's Little Man? And he's right there. No, he's not. I just saw him. He was right there. So at that point, now, and you have to understand this, because you might think like I did at first. Yeah, Grandpa. Yeah, I bet he's a very old man. You've only got 15 minutes here. Start the clock. Whatever you think that man could have done, he had to do in 15 minutes and leave no trace. Now, anybody, if you've ever, there's a show, you can watch it on YouTube, you can find it. There's one of the satellite cable channels will have this. It's called Forensic Files, and I just started watching it. I never watched it when it was on, but I just started watching it, and I can tell you that anybody that ever does a crime anywhere, they leave evidence. And people, believe it or not, will watch these shows like CSI and Forensic Files, and they'll watch these shows because they're planning on killing their husband or their wife. And they will take extraordinary measures to make sure that they don't leave evidence. And next thing you know, they're on the next issue of Forensic Files because they left evidence. She hollers for the family to come down. They start doing their search for Little Man. They're walking around. They're hollering, screaming his name. I've done this before. We were preaching at a church in Arkansas, and we let out. It was dark. It was summertime, and we couldn't find Lindsay, and she was about 11 or 12 at the time. And I mean, panic set in on me, and I am screaming her name because we'd never been to this place before. The pastor's good friends of ours, but turns out she was on the other side of the church building with some other girls from the church, and having fun, not a care in the world. And when I finally found her, man, I wanted to cry and hug her like, I found you. But anyway, so they, within, probably 30 minutes to an hour, they call 911 on one cell phone bill. 911 instantly gets search and rescue out there. They come out there, and they start searching. Now again, so let's take this scenario that the child run off. So that means you have to try to take a guess. If the child is in a full run for 15 minutes, how far could a 3-year-old child get? So they search that area. They go to the creek, and it's got brush and branches and dead trees laying in it. They bring chainsaws out, they're cutting and clearing the creek to make sure he's not jammed under a log somewhere there. And they do this for so many miles or hundreds of feet of the creek to rule out the creek as a possible place he could be laying there or playing there or whatever. He's not there. They bring in dogs. And the last place that the grandpa saw him pretty much is where the scent started and stopped. There was no scent anywhere except that probably little swath that he walked up the trail with his mom and then turned around and went back. Other than that, no scent. The dogs don't get a hit on anything. Again, think of 15 minutes, and let's say Grandpa did something. Grandpa's getting a little crazy, and so he gets mad at the kid, knocks him out, ended up accidentally killing him. He's going to bury the kid in panic and make it look like he run off. 15 minutes. You have to think of what you're going to do. You have to do it, and then you have to cover it in a way that leaves no evidence whatsoever. See, it doesn't make sense, does it? So, they found no sign of any foul play. There's no blood in the camper. There's no blood in the car. There's no blood on Grandpa's jacket. There's no blood. There's no big rock with blood all over it. Again, there's one way in, one way out of this campsite, and they're the only ones there. And to think that somebody could have pulled in there, it's between two mountain ranges, so that's not going to happen. And the road to get there, if you don't take the road, you're not going. And if you do take the road, you're only going 5 miles an hour. My point is, nobody came in the camp and got him. At least they didn't do it on a car. If they did it on by foot, the dogs pick up a track. Or you figure, how far could this man have gotten in a dead run carrying a 3-year-old child or some woman or whatever, and you search that area, no trace, no scent, no clothing. They didn't find his jacket, they didn't find his socks, they didn't find his little cap, they didn't find toenail clipping, they didn't find anything. No blood, no hair, no other sign there. Other than he's just missing. Okay? Or killed. There's no evidence that he was killed. There's no evidence that he was buried somewhere. There's no evidence that he was kidnapped. I mean, you have to think of this in a logical way. So now, let's do this. Here's what we normally do when we're searching. We search on land, north, south, east, and west, and cover a square or cover a circle. And you look in those 4 directions, and then, we hate to say it, then you look down. You look down in the earth, you're looking for the leaves or the grass or the rocks to be disturbed, you're looking for shovel marks, you're looking for a mound of dirt, you're looking for a mound of rocks, you're looking for a body, you're looking down in the earth. He's not there.
Shit, I thought we were gonna...
We just don't look up, because in our minds there is that to us in just a purely scientific world where there's no gods, devils, spirits, nothing, then we leave up out of the equation, because people don't fly, little boys don't float or get blown away in the
I've
wind,
been to do this for a long time.
so we don't look up. We just don't. We don't look up in the skies. Is he up there somewhere? But when we add in the equation of what we know in the Bible exists, principalities and powers and rulers of the darkness and spiritual wickedness, where are the spirits? Where is the spiritual wickedness going on? In high places. He came out with another video called Missing 411 The Hunted, and he deals with hunters that have gone missing. Okay, now I'm a woods hunter. My dad taught me, and my dad was good at it, way better than I am. And my son, Matthew, seems to have, the genes bypassed me and went to him. He's better at it than I am, and he gets it from both grandpas. They have keen eyes in the woods. They know the woods. I never was afraid of the woods when I was a kid. I lived next to a wooded area, and
Oh,
I knew
fuck.
every square foot of the woods for 2 miles behind our house. I explored it. I walked the creek both ways. I did everything down in the woods. The woods never scared me. Never got lost in the woods and I couldn't find my way out. That never happened. And so anybody that's ever hunted throughout their life, you just get a sense for things. And so that's what Politis is looking at. He's looking at hunters. And when hunters go into the woods, they know what they're doing. So this case here is the opposite end. This was a little boy, which has never been found. Nothing. No evidence, nothing. He is missing without any trace. Thomas Messick, missing since November 15th, 2015, age 82. He's an 82-year-old man. Now you might think, Grandpa, Joe Biden's out there hunting with these guys. That wasn't him. Now, he only had one eye. He had battery acid blow up in his face. He couldn't hear very well. But he was agile. And he loved to hunt. And when you love to do it, you do it, don't care how old you get. Well, he had a bunch of buddies. There was, like, I think a 4-man group. And we've done this before. Where you'll have maybe 4 or 5 guys. And 2 or 3 guys will sit, like, in a line. Or maybe in a semicircle area. And 1 or 2 guys make a wide path around, let's say maybe a mile east, and they either drive the truck if there's pasture through there, or they get out and walk. And the idea is the 2 guys or the 1 guy that went around, and they're headed back toward the 2 or 3 guys that are here. The idea is to either jump a deer and try to shoot it then, kill it, or you're going to flush the deer. You're going to drive the deer. And this happened with me. I killed 11 point one year. Me and my son Matthew, he was young enough where he couldn't hunt. He's sitting at my feet in this tree stand. And I saw Ron Dagonia, my friend, pastor friend, is on his land. I saw his truck go around. It's late in the afternoon. And before I knew it, Matthew's pulling at my pant legs and Dad, there's a buck. And what happened was that buck saw that truck, and the truck pushed that buck up the hill toward me. And it just so happened that when I pulled my rifle around and got ready to shoot, that buck stopped and turned around to look back at the truck to see where it was. And when he stopped, I've got his chest right here in my sight. 1 shot, he's dead. Dropped him instantly. That was God, okay? But anyway, so that's how it's done. So they've got 2 guys that are going to drive, his old buddies. They all know what they're doing. They've hunted this place for years. They've camped it. They know the area. They got walkie-talkies. So they're going to start the drive. It's getting close to noon, so it's a different way of hunting. If you're hunting early in the morning, deer hunting, and I think this might have been Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's wooded areas are sort of like Missouri's wooded areas. There's hills and valleys and so on. And if you're going to deer hunt in these states, you get up early in the morning, you get to a stand before daybreak, and you wait for the deer to do an early morning feeding or to come back into cover from feeding all night. Or if the bucks are in rut and does are in estrus, then you're waiting for them to be chasing, okay? But you're waiting for deer to move. And by about 10:30, 11 o'clock, deer probably bedded down to nap because they feel better eating at night because predators. So anyway, it was getting close to noon, so these guys, it's a different way of hunting. You don't wait for them to come to you, you drive them to you. If they're bedded down, these 2 guys are going to flush them out. And the 2 guys sitting in his There was nothing in the woods. And they got to where Thomas was supposed to be, and he wasn't there. I don't remember if any of his stuff was there. But when you go hunting, you don't just go with a gun. You take stuff. You take coffee, you take candy, something to chew on, you take protein bars or whatever. You take something to snack on. Keep your blood sugar up. You do. You just take stuff. Your knife, you're carrying a pack or whatever. And I don't remember if they found anything, but he's gone. And they're not pulling him up on the walkie. So they bring out the county search and rescue services are out the next day. And they're everywhere. They're covering like 2 or 3 counties in a big circle. And they do the grid search. They do this big wide search. Again, no sign, no scent, no blood, no hair. No, they didn't find his clothing. They didn't find any evidence whatsoever of where this man could have gone. An 82-year-old man, where could he have wandered off to in that short amount of time? Where could somebody have done some damage to him and tied him up somewhere or buried him? Where or whatever. I said tied up because we had a case in the St. Louis area back in the 80s, and this broke my heart. This wacko kidnapped this, I think she's a 12-year-old girl, and took her out in the middle of nowhere and tied her up to a tree. And that's where they found her remains. He let her die out there for days, tied up to that tree. There was controversy back then. St. Louis is a location for Defense Mapping Agency, which they call it something different now, but it's basically part of the Army Intelligence Services, where they do high resolution mapping, spy cameras from satellites and stuff like that. And the local police, when they're looking for this girl, they realize if we've got cameras that can spy and pick out the license plate of a Russian nuclear scientist, from 40 miles in the sky, why can't we have satellite information of maybe an area where we think this girl might be? And the CIA and the National whatever Intelligence Services of America told the police to go hang because we're not giving you any of our intelligence. We're not going to show you what we can see. And they basically let that girl die out there. By the way, they think they caught the guy many years later. But anyway, now, again, we look north, south, east, and west, and we look down, but we don't look up. Now, David Pilatus has a third video out, and I've only watched bits and pieces of it, but, it takes it, those of you who are interested in paranormal things like me, I watch Missing 411, and I'm going, there's the UFOs, they got them. Okay, case closed. What are you ready to go for lunch? And we're done. So we think it's got to be something of a paranormal idea. In other words, look up. We know that people report abductions. And in their reports, almost always the same thing. Almost always. Let me read a little bit of. I had my niece niece,
I can understand
Christina,
it.
here at the church. I had her go through John Mack's book on Inducted and just take notes on the cases that he investigated and just write down a brief summary of the people that had been abducted, because I've been saying that they all report nearly the same thing. One guy says there were at least a half a dozen beings in the room, which he called an amphitheater, like a surgery theater, or an OR. And there's these white lights around. One of the beings seemed to be the head doctor in charge. This one gives off all the vibrations of being a female. The others he called drones or staff people just milling around doing whatever. The female being had long silvery hair with large, that is a very common scenario. Very common identification. Long silvery hair with large black eyes without pupils or irises. She was looking at this person that he calls Ed with those loving big sensuous eyes, and they exude this love, romance. Like she's a very wise, mature woman conveying telepathically to me, I have control of this situation. I remember this story. At this time, Ed is 16 years old. She's wearing a dress like a long smock. But that's one story. Let's see here. Let's get away from Ed. Sheila describes the terror of giving up control. They're in control, she said. I have to surrender to it. She felt exploited by them, but at the same time, that we depend on each other. That's a common theme. In other words, the aliens / spirits are saying, we need you, but you need us. That's called symbiosis. A symbiotic relationship is like microorganisms living in my body that are feeding off of junk in my body that if it doesn't feed on them, toxins will build up in my body. Okay, you don't want to be free from germs in your body. You don't. You need them. Okay? Because some of those germs do us good. So that's a symbiosis. The germs get to live in our bodies and feed off the junk that we can't have. Meanwhile, we supply them with the junk that we can't have that would kill us. Okay, so they help keep us healthy, we keep them fed. Another symbiosis is humans and trees. Trees breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen.
I'm
Humans
thinking about, because
breathe
that's going to
in
take a long.
oxygen, breathe
Okay.
out carbon dioxide. We need each other.
Let me.
Okay, and God has designed this balance. However, God made it clear in the scriptures that when it comes to different species, different kinds, okay, that's the Bible word is kind, that they're not to mingle of a different kind. Don't try to mingle your cattle with your sheep. In other words, that doesn't mean don't let them eat in the same field, which anyway, it means you don't mix their kinds together to get a cattle sheep. You don't do it. Now, the cows have no interest in the sheep, and the sheep have no interest in a 2,000-pound Brahma bull on top of it, okay? No interest whatsoever. So man says, well, we're going to do it anyway. God said, don't do it. And that works here and here. You have these beings, and God tells them, stay away from the earth women. What earth women? Oh, those earth women. Hey, baby. And the earth women go along with it. Now you have giants. You have a hybrid creature. That's also another common story. Hybrid That's also another common story. So you have these abductions taking place all over the world. And again, the question is asked, is that even allowed in Scripture? Is there anything in Scripture where not MUFON says, not Mike Hoggard says, but what God says in His Scripture? And I never finished this series. I've never finished a series ever. Which, by the way, part 4 of the Vatican Secrets series dealing with Predator Priest and the Confessional is out. I can tell you, I'm not done with the script yet. I'm gathering the notes. I can tell you the next series that I'm doing in this Vatican Secrets, it'll blow your mind. Okay? I'm just saying. It's not hyperbole either. It will blow your mind. Okay, what I found. And a lot of scripture. Take my hat, because it's not allowed to pray or prophesy with your head covered if you're a man. Nehemiah 1:8. God said, remember, I beseech thee the word that thou commandest thy servant Moses, saying, if ye transgress, I will scatter you abroad among the nations. And remember, the word nations can be flesh and blood nations or spirit nations. Wait a minute. First Peter.
I have no patience, so.
A holy nation, a royal priesthood, okay, a spiritual nation. But if you turn unto me and keep my commandments and do them, though there were of you cast out unto the uttermost part of the heaven,
I'm too
look
lazy.
up.
1, 2,
Is it
3, 4,
possible?
5, 6, 7,
And
8, 9, 10,
that's what David
11,
Paulides is
12,
getting into,
13,
because the
14,
third
15,
video
16.
of his series is Missing 411, the UFO connection. And of course, all the UFO people were going, well, you should have done that in the first one. But Paulides is trying to be
3,
a detective.
4, 5, 6,
He's trying
7,
to follow
8, 9, 10,
investigation
11,
procedures.
12,
You don't automatically
16,
presume
17,
that the
18, 19,
husband
20.
killed his wife. Now, he might be a suspect, but you just don't go in and nab him because you think he looks like he killed his wife. You got to build
1,
up
2,
the
3,
evidence.
4, 5,
So in the first
6,
set of
7,
books and
8,
videos
9,
that he
10,
does,
11,
he's
12,
laying
13,
out
14,
the
15,
evidence.
16, 17,
If
18,
there is
19,
no
20,
trace
21,
in
22,
the
23,
ground,
24, 25.
north, south, east, or
9,
west,
30, 31, 32, 33, 34,
there is
35,
only one other
39,
direction
40, 41, 42,
that
43,
we haven't
44, 45,
looked or
46,
considered.
47, 48, 49,
So now
50, 51,
there
52,
is a
53,
UFO connection.
54, 55,
Okay?
56, 57,
Though there
58,
were of you
59,
cast out into the
60.
uttermost part of the heaven, yet will I gather them from thence, and will bring them unto the place that I have chosen to set my name there.
60.
And that's based on Deuteronomy 30, verse 4. If any of thine be driven out unto the outmost parts of heaven. Now there is the first heaven, which is the sky, the second heaven, which is
1, 2,
space, the universe.
3, 4,
The third
5,
heaven is where God
6,
and the
7,
angels are in the
8,
temple of God
9,
and so
10,
on,
11,
where
12,
Christ is at the right hand of
13.
the Father.
Fuck you.
So I don't think that he means we're not driven and cast into
1,
the third heaven
2,
as some
3,
torture
4, 5,
punishment
6,
for us,
7, 8,
right?
9, 10, 11,
So it would not be proper
14, 15, 16, 17,
for
18,
God
19,
to
20,
say
21, 23,
that
24,
if
25,
you, the Jews, were
26,
driven
27, 28,
to where I
29,
live
30, 31,
and
32,
cast
33.
up
Let's
to
just say
this
times
wonderful,
32
amazing, eternal life place, right?
equals
Doesn't make any sense. We're not driven there.
39,000?
We're carried there. We're taken there as part of our inheritance. But it's not some place that we get pulled out of our house and get put in prison in heaven.
10.
Okay, the third heaven. God said,
396,000.
if
So
that happens, from thence will the Lord thy God
396
gather thee, and from
divided
thence will
by
he fetch thee. The
64
Lord thy God will bring thee into the land which thy
equals
fathers possessed, and thou shalt
6,000.
possess it, and he will do thee good and multiply thee above thy
So
fathers.
we'll do it like this.
So in essence, God is saying, look up.
I just feel like
Look
cheating.
up. Because it's possible. And now, if you want to go back and watch the Taken series that I did in 2022, you'll see you'll see some of the scriptural evidence. I found something the other day. Again, this is one of those situations
54.
where if you get to a place in the Bible and you look at it and say, I've already read that chapter once, read it again. Because I guarantee you, you missed something. Guarantee it. Now, Ezekiel 33, and I'll finish with this, is the chapter that
9
sets
times
up
4 is 36.
the ministry of a watchman. In real life, a guard at a guard tower, or someone, guarding a military camp, or whatever. Somebody guarding and protecting a city. In a spiritual case,
How many of these do I need divided by?
a pastor or someone in the ministry who looks to see what's going on in the world
171
and
of these.
warns the people with enough evidence and give them enough time to be ready. Because if I sound the trumpet, then the people should expect there to be a sword approaching our doors. Now, what happens, people, when you keep sounding false alarms? Nobody believes you after about the 20th time. In fact, they just quit listening to you. Some of you are dealing with that right now because you sounded false alarm. You know I'm big on that. Okay? So, I never saw this in Ezekiel 33 until a few weeks ago. Let me read it.
I wanted to do this for a long time.
Ezekiel 33:1. Again, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, speak to the children of thy people, and say unto them, when I bring the sword upon a land, if the people of the land take a man of their coast and set him for their watchman, if when he seeth the sword come upon the land, he blow the trumpet and warn the people, then whosoever heareth the sound of the trumpet and taketh not warning, if the sword come and take him away, his blood shall be upon his own head. He heard the sound of the trumpet and took not warning, his blood shall be upon him, but he that taketh warning shall deliver his soul. But if the watchman see the sword come and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned, if the sword come and take any person from among them, he is taken away in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at the watchman's hand. Did you get it? Did you get it? Did you see it in that passage of scripture that I just read? I always thought, see, that's the problem. My boss, Ron DeGo, he rode me hard as a young man, and I needed it. And I'd always do something dumb at work. And he'd say, Howard, why'd you do? I said, well, I thought that, and Ron would say, it's exactly your problem. Howard, I'll pay you to think. I hired you from the neck down. I'll do the thinking. Oh, and I've seen him mad at me. Oh, good grief. I thought that when the sword came in, it just killed everybody. That's not what happened. Let me read verse 4. If the sword come and take him away. What's happening here? An army comes, surrounds the city, they break into the gates, or somebody just left the gate open because nobody was watching. And they didn't go in and kill everybody. They took everybody out to be slaves. They took their women to be their concubines and their daughters, and set their men and their sons to labor. That's typically what happened. They took them away. And then he says it again. Verse 6, if the watchman see the sword come and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned, if the sword come and take any person from among them, he is taken away. And I went, oh my goodness. The sword's not coming to kill them. The sword's coming to take them.
Turn.
You believe in rapture, right? You believe that the Lord's going to appear in the air, and he's going to take us to be with him and to take them. You believe in rapture, right? You believe that the Lord's going to appear in the air, and he's going to take us to be with him, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Wherefore comfort one another with these words. We're going to see Christ in the air, and through no effort of our own, we're going to be lifted up.
4 times 9.
So, I've asked before, I've tried to think it out. Does the devil have a plan that looks like the rapture? Are there people right now, Elon Musk, who want people to live up there? Yes. Are there spirits up there
7 times 9.
that have taken people away?
7, so
maybe a 3-year-old boy
9
where he literally just disappeared
9 times 64.
where he was standing. The old man, the hunter, waiting for a deer to come so they could have some meat for the winter and tell the story about the deer kill. That's the best part of it. Gone, missing, disappeared where he was standing without a trace. They haven't found him yet. You look north, south, east, west, and you look down. But nobody thought to look up. And of course, where would we look? But I think now more than ever, that's, especially now that I see it in Ezekiel 33, I think that's going to happen. Okay? Now, maybe I have already sounded an alarm. I don't know. I always try to say that I'm working through scriptures to see if these things, I'm trying to be a Berean about this to see if the scripture allows it. If the scripture allows it, then I'm going to go with it. If the scripture doesn't allow it, and it doesn't say anything, flat earth, then I'm not going to say anything about it either. Anyway, good to be with you today. Hope you were blessed.
I'm gonna redo this.
Continue to pray for us, and pray for our ministries. Pray for the people of Kenya. I just want to say thank you. 2022 has been a taxing year and a very challenging year for our church, for our ministry, for me. But in a way, that's been good. Because when you go through the fire, you're refined by it. That's the purpose of it. And I see that now. So thank you for loving me and for being there on the other side of this. And I love you. And keep me in your prayers, okay? God bless you. We'll see you. I had surgery. Hey everybody, Pastor Mike here from our
161,
home on
108.
the range. Sweetie Pie had surgery Thursday morning, pretty early, and so I've been taking care of her the last few days.
414.
And she's doing well. She's sore, resting, and so we appreciate everybody's prayers and your understanding. This is another surgery related to her cancer from a few years back. She's not had any signs of any cancer since then, and we are very, very thankful for that. So anyway, a new video came out. Let me go back. I gotta throw on this note, or I'll forget it. And I've got my MUFON hat on today for a reason. A video came up in my feed this morning from YouTube, and it was a series that the BBC, I think, had done on the Israeli spy agency Mossad. And so that looked interesting to me. So I pulled it up, and of course they're going to give background on the Israel as a nation, as a state, as a legally recognized state on this earth, which came about in 1947. The United Nations took a vote to partition or repartition this area of land between the Mediterranean and the Dead Sea and the Jordan River that was called Palestine. It previously was, that whole area was under British protection. It was a protectorate of the British Empire. But if I remember right, I think it's 1917, the Balfour Declaration basically lifted that area out from underneath the being part of the Commonwealth or the protectorate of the United Kingdom. In other words, the Brits had Palestine for years. They ruled over it. They were the law. They enforced laws, whatever. And then in the Balfour Declaration, they took it off and just let them be whatever they want to be. So, in 1947, the United Nations took a vote. Now, I knew this part, to partition this area of Palestine and give those people, those Arab people referred to as Palestinians, a portion of it and give the rest to the Jews, the people of Israel, the 12 tribes, as a homeland. They said, we just about got slaughtered completely in the Holocaust. So we're not going to do that again. We need a place to call our own. And so they did. And then the documentary went on to talk about how soon after they formed as a nation, they got in the intelligence business, because they said, we're not going to let this happen again. Nobody's going to slip up behind our backs and just kill us and try to wipe us off the map. And if you've lived in this century, in the last century, then you know that there's hardly been a year that goes by that some Arab nation doesn't want to try its hand at getting rid of Israel. And I don't care what your views are. I really don't. When God made a promise to Abram, it's a promise he intended to keep. He said, I will bless them that bless thee, and I will curse him that curse thee. And I don't curse Israel by saying, I am Israel now. I've replaced Israel. God's not going to deal with the Jews
125.
anymore. I don't do that. Anyway, getting back to that vote, to me this is significant, and I don't know why I never
416.
caught this before. I can't remember if I've ever heard it before and just dismissed it. I don't think it's in any of my notes anywhere. Take a guess at the number of people that voted in the United Nations at that time to give that land to Israel. Setting up, then the next year, 1948, Israel declares itself a state, a nation. 33 was the number. And I'm going, oh, that's got to be significant. It does. And I'm not prepared to go all into it. But are you kidding me? 33 men basically voted to give life to a Israel state. And the most famous 33 Jewish person in the world was Jesus Christ. Okay? So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out to you. I shared it with a couple guys this morning, so you're not the first to hear about it. You're the second.
56.
But it was to me pretty interesting. Then we hear that Pope Benedict is now officially paying for all of his sins and his crimes and all of the idolatry. I'm not trying to be mean, but God's word is God's word. The rule book is the rule book. God did not say you can't make images and idols unless they're blessed by the Pope and they're an action. I got to thinking about this the other day. What is it, and I know the answer to this, but what is it that makes a church an official Catholic church? Can you get a shed and move into it and set benches and add things up and say this is a Catholic church? No. There's rules in the Catholic canon of laws. There's rules on what designates a certain piece of real estate on this earth as a Catholic church. And one thing in particular is the presence in the form of statues of a statue of Mary, a statue of Joseph, and a crucifix with Jesus hanging on it, which to me is an abomination because it says that our Lord is still suffering, and that is a total contradiction of Scripture. Read Hebrews. Read the whole book. Why not? But read Hebrews because it clearly says Christ is done suffering. He only had to suffer once, and those priests in every Catholic church doing masses
156, 105,
2, sometimes 3 times a day, killing Christ over again, causing him to suffer all over again for sins that he's already suffered for that he didn't commit. So to me, but anyway, I got to thinking about this. There's one thing that God said to Israel in the Old Testament. He said, I'm paraphrasing, but I think this is in Deuteronomy. He said, remember the day that I met with you at Mount Sinai, which is Exodus 19, Exodus 20, and all throughout 20 and 30 and 32, Exodus 32, 33, and 34. Finally, Moses comes down from the mountain the second time with the copy of the Ten Commandments, and God said, during all that time, did you ever see me? No. You heard my voice, you saw the fire, you saw the smoke, you heard the trumpets, but you didn't see me. So you can't carve an image, you can't make a painting, you can't draw a picture, you can't fathom what I look like. You have no idea what I look like, so therefore you really can't make an image of me and say it's me, because it's not. Because I haven't shown my face to anybody. And we all have this Western idea of what we think Jesus looked like, this soft, long, brownish hair, beautiful, adoring face, and on the old hymn books. That's probably not what he looked like, but we don't know. So you show me a carved image of a guy hanging from a cross, and I'm supposed to say that that's Christ. But how can I? When there were other people in the Roman Empire that were killed in that exact same way. Why couldn't that guy up there on the cross be one of the thieves on the cross? Because we didn't know what they looked like either. So the presence of the statue of Joseph, the statue of Mary, and the crucifix has to be in this building to even consider it to be a Catholic church. It has to have the presence of the Eucharist in it, which is the wafer. That's Christ to them. And I know that because there was a church that shut down or something like that. I was reading something, and all they were going to fire the priest. Well, when they fired the priest, he grabbed the Eucharist that was in the chapel and took it with him, removing the blessing of that church. In other words, they can't have church there because they lost their Jesus. He's not there anymore. I mean, this is silly rules, but it's their rules. They're the ones that made them up. God didn't make them up. But anyway, my point is, that statue of Joseph, they would point to that and say, that's Joseph. How? How is it Joseph? Let's say that statue is made out of wood. It's carved wood, or let's say it's a ceramic of some kind, or let's say it's stone of some kind that was poured into a mold which is like a molten image. It was poured into a mold and set and painted, or it was carved out of rock or marble and decorated, or it was made out of wood and carved and overlaid and painted, and so on and so on and so on. But the idea is, you say that's Joseph, and I say, no, that's a stick of wood that you put the name of Joseph on there, but it's not Joseph. You point to this commonly held vision of the Virgin Mary with this white tunic on and this light blue, sky blue robe on. She's the queen of heaven, so she's going to wear sky blue on her. And point to that idol and say, that's Mary. And I say, no, it's not. It's a piece of stone that somebody dug up out of a...
Well, I gotta see this. Mercy Sproul with the evil.
It's not fair.
What is he going? Where did it
Dream
come
up
from?
the themes for our conferences each year. The
103.
staff does that. And then they come to me and give assignments as to what I'm supposed to address. And you notice on the board a moment ago that I have been given 2 questions to address, each of which would be worthy of a lengthy series to consider. And I'm supposed to answer these questions in one message. Well, that's impossible. I won't do it because I can't do it. But we'll give you a little introduction to these questions. And the first of the questions is, what is evil? The second question is, where did it come from? But the first part of the question is, what is evil? And my immediate response to that in presidential fashion is to say, it depends upon what the meaning of is. Now, that's really not a joke. I'm serious about that because there are different ways in which we use the verb is as a verb to be. And when we're dealing with the question of what is evil, we face immediately the issue of whether evil really is at all. That might seem strange to you, but my first assertion this morning is that evil isn't. That is, it is not.
74.
Why? Because evil is nothing. Am I going too fast? evil is nothing. Now, lest you think that I've fallen into Christian Science, a religion that's neither Christian nor science, where the reality of evil is denied altogether and considered to be an illusion, I want to clarify what I mean when I say evil is not, or that evil is nothing. Before I do that, let me tell you a story of an occasion where I was asked to debate a spokesperson for Christian Science on this question of the nature of evil, and the position of my opponent that day was that evil is an illusion. And so in the course of that discussion, I asked him a question. Did he think that I was an illusion? Was I a fig Newton of his imagination? Was I a fig Newton of his imagination? And he declared that he did not think that I was an illusion. He considered that I was real. And I said, well, we're really having this discussion here,
41.
and I am saying that evil is not an illusion, and you are saying that it is an illusion. And my simple question is this: do you think it's good that I am saying that evil is not an illusion? He said no. I said, well, if it's not good that I'm saying that, it must be bad. And so here's one example of an evil that is
156.
not an illusion. And it sort of went downhill after that. But what do I mean when I say that evil is nothing? What I mean by that is I'm taking the word nothing and resting upon its etymological derivation, where the term nothing comes from the combination of a negative prefix and a subject. And the word nothing really means no thing. And the reason I want to stress that point is that in the culture, we get the idea that evil is some kind of independent substance, something that is in your drinking water or
156.
in the clouds somewhere, some force or power that is independent, that exists in and of himself and influences the affairs of your life and of this world. And so the first thing we have to say about what evil is what it is not. It is not a thing that has existence. Evil has no being. It has no ontological status. Rather, evil is an action of something that is a thing. I am something, you are something, and when I do something that is not good, then I am doing something that is evil. But evil then is an activity of some being. It has no being itself. Now that may seem like a pedantic point and of no immediate concern to the second question of where evil comes from, but later on, God willing, I'll try to indicate why our definition of evil is so important to the deeper question of where it comes from. Now, back to the idea of its nothingness. Historically, the two great theologian philosophers in the history of the church who have addressed the question of what is evil were, of course, Thomas Aquinas and St. Augustine before him. And both Augustine and Aquinas used two Latin words, of course, because you can't do theology without using Latin words. And that they use two Latin words to describe the nature of evil. And those two words were negatio and privatio. And you can guess the translation of those two Latin words. Privatio comes into the English language with the word privation, and negatio comes into the English language with the word negation. And so, historically and classically, the nature of evil has been defined in terms of negation and privation. In philosophy and in theology, one of the most important ways in which we try to give definitions to things that are mysterious is by using the method called the way of negation. And that method talks in terms of what something is not. For example, when we talk about the character and the being of God, we say that God is infinite. What does that mean? Well, that means he is not finite. That's an application of this way of negation. And so what Augustine and Aquinas were getting at is that to discuss the nature of evil, which the Bible calls the mystery of iniquity, we have to first understand it by way of negation, by what it is not. Now, evil in this sense can only be defined against the backdrop of what is good. And in biblical terms, evil is defined by words like this: ungodliness, unrighteousness, injustice, for example. So that the term is used as the negation, the opposite of the positive thing that's being affirmed. So that injustice or unjustness, it can only be understood against the previous concept of justice. Unrighteousness can only be recognized as unrighteousness against the background of righteousness as the standard by which unrighteousness can be recognized and can be defined. I think that's pretty easy to see that the way in which negative language is used to describe evil. In this sense, the great theologians would indicate that evil is parasitic. It's like a parasite. It can't be known in and of itself as some independent being, but can only be known and understood against the positive standard. And like a parasite, if the host dies, the parasite dies with it, because the parasite depends upon the host for its own strength and existence. And in like manner, and in an analogical way, the same thing is true of evil, as that you can't really describe it, you can't really define it, except against the background of the good. Now, the other word that is used by Augustine and Aquinas is the word privation. And what
do
a
something
privation
irritate.
is some sort of lack or some sort of deficiency. If you don't get something that you want, that doesn't mean that you're experiencing deprivation. But if you don't get something that you need, then it can be properly said that you have been deprived, that you are lacking something that is necessary and essential to your very being. If we go to the Westminster Confession of Faith, the 17th century Reformed Confession, and its catechetical formulations in the Westminster Larger Catechism, and then in this shorter catechism, you have the simple question that is asked, what is sin? What is sin? And since you all know the catechism, you know the answer to that before I give it. What is sin? Sin is any want of conformity to or transgression of the law of God. So there, confessionally, sin or moral evil is defined in terms of a lack, of a privation, of a want of conformity to. Righteousness involves conforming to the law of God, doing what God commands. But sin enters in when we fail to do what God commands and we fail to conform to his standards of what is righteous. So on the one hand, the Catechism says that sin is a want of conformity to, which is a kind of privatio, a kind of privation, or transgression of the law of God. Now, we're moving out of simple privation and simple negation to another element. An element that the reformers of the 16th century added to the classic definition of evil. They agreed that evil is negation and is privation, but lest anyone should think that because evil has no being, no independent status, is not a thing, unless because of that we come to the conclusion that evil really is an illusion. The reformers said that yes, sin is negation, or evil is negation, evil is privation, but they added another Latin term, don't they always? They added the term actuosa. That is to say, evil is privatio actuosa, meaning that though evil is not something that exists in and of itself, it is real, and its effects and its impact are devastating. There is an actual privation, that is, an activated privation, an activated disobedience to the Word of God. And because real beings act out real evil, though evil is not independent, nevertheless it is real. Am I making sense? You getting that? You understanding that point?
No
Is it
clue.
too obscure? Of course not. You all get it, don't you? So that's where we start with this question of what is evil and where does it come from? That's the easy part of the two questions. The second part of the question has to do with the origin of evil and how evil could intrude into a universe created by a God who is altogether holy, altogether righteous. And not only is this universe created by such a God, it is also governed and ruled by such a God. And if this God is holy, and if he is righteous, how in the world can he tolerate so much evil in it? The origin of evil has been called the Achilles heel of Christianity. And that analysis, or that analogy, goes back to the Iliad and to the Battle of Troy, where Achilles could only be wounded in one place, and that was at the back of his heel, which was the only part of his body that was not protected by his armor. So when we say that something is the Achilles heel, we mean that it is the supreme point of vulnerability. And critics of Christianity have said where the Christian truth claim is most vulnerable is at this point of the presence of evil in a world allegedly made and governed by a good and holy God. Now, sometimes, as Christians, we fail to feel the weight of that problem. The philosopher John Stuart Mill put it this way: the presence of evil makes the very existence of God problematic. Because in the Christian view of God, we say that on the one hand, God is omnipotent. He possesses all power. On the other hand, we say that God is loving and good. And Mill looks at the pain and the sorrow and the suffering and the moral evil in this world, and he said, wait a minute, these two ideas, the goodness of God and the omnipotence of God, in light of the reality of evil, cannot logically cohere or coexist. His argument is this: if
There's so
God
many
is
gold bars,
all
my God.
powerful and has the power to create a universe without evil, or has the power to rid the universe of evil at any given moment, if he has the power to do it, and he doesn't do it, then he's not good.
That makes a
Or
lot
he's
of
not
sense,
loving.
though.
Because what kind of being who has omnipotent power could stand by and observe the pain, the suffering,
Yeah.
and wickedness in a universe of his own creation and not eliminate it? Can't be good. Upon the other hand, God is good and God is loving and wants to get rid of evil that brings so much of a blemish to his creation, like the BP oil spill that everybody recognizes is a disaster, and God would see it as a disaster, and he would love to see it cleaned up, but he doesn't have the power to do it. But you see, one way or the other, God's either not good or he's not all powerful. Now, I think there's an adequate answer to that question, and it's one, God willing, I'll try to provide for you in the minutes that are left in this consideration. But
64 times 3.
Before I go any further, to answer the question of where evil came from, I have to give my short answer to the question. A down and dirty answer to the question, where did evil come from? And my
Times
answer is this.
9
I don't
equals.
know. So maybe it's time for me to just sit down and shut up.
64 times 9 is 56.
But what I want to do in the time remaining is to tell you
576
why I don't know. 40 years ago,
times
I was
3
giving a lecture on this
equals
subject back in
1728
Pittsburgh, and in the
times
audience was my
2,
mentor,
3, 4,
John Gerstner,
5,
and he heard me say on that occasion these things. I said, I don't know
6,
how to explain the
7,
origin of
8,
evil.
9,
And
10,
what else I can tell
11,
you is
12,
that I'm sure
13,
that in
14,
this world I will never be able
14,
to answer that question. I don't know of any philosopher or theologian
14,
who has answered it adequately, at least to satisfy my mind, and I'm sure I'm not going to go beyond
times
the
14,
insights of Augustine, Aquinas, Calvin, Luther, Edwards, and the rest
24,000
who have wrestled with
gold
it.
bars.
When I was finished, my mentor took me aside and he was somewhat pained and visibly irritated
Yeah, do that one
with
again.
me.
Again.
And I said, what's the matter? And he said, what's the matter is your arrogance. I said, my arrogance? What did I do? He said, you told these people that you didn't know where evil came from and that you couldn't explain the problem, and that's fine. But you're only 30 years old, and you've assumed that you have already reached the saturation point of all the knowledge that you will ever acquire in your lifetime. How do you know, R.C. Sproul, that you will be able to solve this problem tomorrow?
That's deep.
I said, because Aquinas couldn't do it, and Augustine couldn't do it, and Edwards couldn't do it, and you can't do it, and these guys are so much more intelligent than I am. I'm trying to tell you, I don't think there's much likelihood that I'm going to solve a conundrum that they were unable to resolve. Well, again, he rebuked me for my arrogance in assuming that I had already reached the pinnacle of my own
26.
knowledge,
Oh, wow. 24.
and that maybe someday I would be
15.
able to answer the question. Well, to
100.
defend the remarks that I made 40 years ago, I still don't know
4
the
times that much
answer to
is
this question, and
100,000
not for a
gold bars.
lack of trying.
10 times that much is a million. Oh.
What this question demands philosophically and theologically is an adequate theodicy. For how many of you is the word theodicy a new word, or a word that you would have difficulty defining? Thank you. Okay, we're going to learn a new word today. The word theodicy, Theodicy, is a word that comes from a combination of two very important biblical words. There is the word theos, which is the New Testament word for God. And then there is the word dikaios, which is the New Testament word for justice or righteousness, a form of which is the word dikaiosune, which is the New Testament word for justification. What a theodicy is an intellectual, reasoned defense of God for the problem of evil in the universe. So, in other words, it's an attempt to answer the critique of John Stuart Mill and others, and to justify God for this problem of evil. I don't know how many theodicies I've studied in my lifetime, quite a few of them. I have yet to find one completely satisfying to my own brain. In a few minutes, I will provide the theodicy which I think comes the closest to solving the problem that I've ever seen, but still lacks final resolution. Now, I don't want to exaggerate.
Got a lot of gold bars, my God.
But my estimate is, I don't think this is hyperbole, Vesta could confirm it, you could ask her, at least it seems to me that about once a month, maybe it's not quite that frequently, but it seems to me that about once a month I get a letter from somebody out there who has solved the problem of the origin of evil. And they want to run it by me. And I have to answer these letters as politely and nicely as I know how, when I want to say, this is amateur night, folks, and I don't think you feel the weight of the problem, because the answers that I find in these letters that are addressed to me, and I do appreciate that people struggle with this question and are trying to come up with answers, but it seems to me that the answers I hear again and again are not just simple, but they're simplistic. They don't really see the depth of the problem. And of course, the most common answer I receive is that the origin of evil has to be located in human free will. And of course, we all understand that the one who brings evil into the world, moral evil, is man, Adam and Eve, or before that, the devil. And both of those personages are exercising the faculty of choosing, in which they have been endowed by their Creator, and that they have made choices, the result of which are evil. And so I said, well, see, what's the problem? We answer this problem with the free will of man. Sin came into being because Adam or Eve, or both of them, freely decided to disobey God. Just as Lucifer, when he was a good angel, was transformed into an evil, fallen angel when he exercised his free will by choosing to disobey God. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not denying that those choices were made, and I'm not denying that they were evil choices. What I'm saying is that they don't solve the problem, because we know this, that before a choice can be made, prior to the choices being made, there has to be some kind of moral inclination. And if you examine it as carefully, for example, as Jonathan Edwards did in his classic work on the freedom of the will, Edwards comes to the conclusion that the only way you can account for an evil choice is by having an evil inclination or disposition to that choice.
You idiot.
Manifest that Adam and Eve's choice was evil, and they chose it according to their will, and that's also true of Satan. But the question is, where did their prior disposition come from? What was it that inclined Adam and Eve to disobey God? Now, part of Roman Catholic theology is to struggle with this question and talk about the doctrine of concupiscence. You may have heard of concupiscence, and Rome defines concupiscence in this manner, that concupiscence is of sin and inclines to sin, but is not sin? Well, in one respect, I think that's right, that it is not an actual sin of disobedience in terms of the outward action, but that which is of sin and inclines to sin is sinful. And so a being who has a desire to do something evil, before he chooses to do that evil, is already fallen before he makes the choice. Do you see that? That's the point that so many people miss when they say, oh, well, it was all because of the free choice of Adam and Eve. But the question is, why did these creatures who were made in the image of God and who were made good choose to disobey him? Well, if you say for no reason, there was no prior inclination, if there was no prior, well, if you say for no reason,
Reasoned.
if there was no,
Hold on, guys. I'm gonna do something. back. I gotta eat something now.
Quarry. Some guy carved on it, some guy painted on it, you hung it up there, you're trying to tell me it's Mary, but I'm telling you it's a rock, is all it is. And then don't even get me started again on the crucifix. So try to convince me in a way that makes sense that when I walk in, let's say I'm going to convert to Catholicism. You want to convert me? Try to explain to me in a way that makes biblical sense how those statues there are going to cause me now to venerate. They remove themselves from, well, we don't worship idols. We venerate them. Okay, let's see. So you go in, the first thing you do when you walk into the Catholic Church is what? You bow. Bowing to what? The idols up on the stage. And you genuflect, you cross yourself, you get the holy. What made that water holy? It's been sitting there all week, getting tepid. It's got flies that landed on it. It's got dust on it. What makes that water holy? It was blessed by the Pope in, 1,000-gallon drums at the Vatican. At Easter, I think is how it works. I think that's how it is. The Pope blesses a mass amount of water by saying magic Latin words and crossing this and sprinkling holy water on that, I guess, incense, and now the water is holy. And you have to dip your fingers in there and do this. Now you're holy for how long? Because that water doesn't let, apparently you got to do it again. Every time you walk into the church, you got to holy yourself with that magic water. It doesn't make sense. None of it does. That's a bowl of water. That's a stick that has a face carved in it that you say is Joseph, but there are no pictures in my Bible. None. So I can't know what Joseph looked like. I can't know what Mary looked like. I can't know what Jesus looked like. So telling me, just putting the names on there, because I know what they did in Rome. They had the statue of Saturn. They had the statue of Apollo. They had the statue of Zeus. They had the statue of Athena and the statue of Persephone and of all these goddesses and the statue of Diana in Ephesus. And when Constantine became a Christian, they pried the nameplates off the statue and made new nameplates. This is Paul. Okay? This is Peter over here. And that's the Virgin Mary instead of the fertility goddess. Okay? Now she's anti-fertility somehow, somewhere. It just doesn't make sense. And so Pope Benedict passed away. 95 years old, and to me it'd be horrible to follow Catholicism all your life, and that's what he did. He followed Catholicism all his life. And last night, while you were asleep, he went to stand before God. The real Jesus sitting at the right hand of the Father. And he saw who the real Holy Father was, and it wasn't Benedict. It wasn't Joseph Ratzinger. It wasn't him. Now, I'd say pray for his family, but I don't know if he has any kids.
I think I need to.
We don't know. The new video came out. And I don't know if I was anticipating this one, but it came out last week, a couple weeks ago, something like that. It's a part of a series of videos done by a man by the name of David Paulides. Now, his name on a website or YouTube or the book that he wrote. It looks like
No,
I
you
couldn't figure
fucking
out if it was
idiot.
Paul Ides
God.
or Paulides. It's Paulides. Then I watched some of the videos, and it's David Paulides. He was a Southern California cop and a detective for years. Did police work, knew how to do investigations and so on. And for somehow, some way, he got interested in cases of missing people at national parks all over the country. And he started getting case information. And he was appalled that it didn't, not only did he find out that the National Park Service, which is under the Department of Interior, they don't have statistics on how many people end up missing in national parks across the country. It seems like that would be somebody's job in the Department of Interior. There's a bureaucrat somewhere who sits at a desk, and I'm pretty sure he's supposed to keep track of that, and apparently they're saying nobody keeps track of it because nobody has a number for anybody. But number one, not only was he not getting any statistics on missing people in national parks, it seems like he was getting interfered with in his investigations. Like, go find something else to do. And what really struck me, the books he's written are called Missing 411. 411 is the code in America. If you dial 411, you get the phone company information service. Hello, information. Yeah, can you find me the number of a guy named Chuck in Pennsylvania? And that's what that's for. A guy named Chuck service. Hello, information. And that's what that's for. So it's missing 411, missing information. And it focuses on these people that, and there's a couple cases I'll point out to you, that their story of how they went missing, and in some cases, no evidence was found whatsoever. And I don't mean little evidence, I mean no evidence. Other than there's a person now that nobody in the world can account for. There's a missing person. Or there are cases where remains have showed up in scattered places in areas that were already searched thoroughly in. And none of that makes any sense. How can you search in an area? And if you know how they do grid searches, you've probably seen them on the news and whatever, that people line up probably about 10 feet apart. They say if you can't see the person next to you, if you can't see their ankles, you're too far away from them. And they get a string and they make a grid in an area around where the person was last seen, and they start doing a grid search. Let's look for evidence. Let's look for his hat or their clothes or their shoes or some blood or a body or the kid, lying up, holding a squirrel, whatever. There's been children got lost in the forest and found. There was a case here a few years ago down south of here. Where a guy found a kid that had ended up missing, and after like 3 or 4 days, I think it was a dog.
1, 2,
that he had,
3.
He was a little kid, but he was alive. So anyway, one of the cases that
4.
to me was interesting was there was a little boy named Dior Kunz, and he went missing, July 10th, 2015, in Idaho at a national forest called Salmon Chalice National Forest. Now, the town that's next to is a little town called then the
5,
road
6,
ends. That's the end of the world right there.
1, 2,
Hey, if you
3,
ever
4, 5,
wondered
6,
where a highway ends, go to Leadore,
3,
Idaho,
4,
because the end of the world is
5,
right there. It literally does stop at
6,
in this national forest
7.
at a campsite. And when I say campsite, we're not talking about big RVs, stuff like that. There's no water, there's no electric, you're roughing it. But there's a nice little creek out there, Clearwater Creek, snow runoff and stuff like that. There's fish in it, things to do. So this family, man and his fiance, and the boy's not quite 3 years old. And so he has to be watched. Okay? Somebody that's 3 years old, you have to watch them. And they did. But the story was that the dad, he's a young man, he caught some fish and came back to the camp and said, look at all these fish I caught. And they go, no way, you didn't catch those. Show us where. So I think it was his mom and dad that walked up there with him, and his fiance walking behind that group, and little Dior, they called him Little Man. He's walking with his mom, and he gets a little ways up toward where they're going to go to the creek, and he says, I don't want to go. So he turns around, and mom says, well, then go back to Grandpa at the campsite. So apparently it was her grandpa, maybe, but the child knew him. So she kept turning around to make sure that he was walking into the camp and into the knowledge and presence of his grandfather, who was
Cohen's teenage aunt reveals what she thinks happened. What?
Liberty Mutual customized my...
It has been 8 years since 2-year-old Dior Coons Jr. disappeared from the Timber Creek campground near Leadore. Now, a former private investigator is back on the case. Eyewitness News 3's Kaylee Galaviz has the latest about the efforts to find the missing boy.
As much as everybody wants this thing to go away and everybody to be quiet and just move on, the questions need to be answered for the family and those that Dior left behind.
On July 10th, 2015, this little boy, Dior Coons Jr., went missing at a campground near Leadore.
My 2-year-old son, we can't find him.
After having to back off from the case due to a major falling out years back, a family member has rehired Philip Klein as the private investigator to find out what happened to that 2-year-old boy.
You can sue the archive information. You can sue that surveillance operations are ongoing. There was a couple of things in the timeline we need to look at a little bit closer.
Many theories have been shared by spectators of what may have happened, from an animal attack to an abduction to intentional foul play. Klein is still defending what he has believed since the beginning, that Dior's parents, Jessica Mitchell and Vernal Coons, know what happened to Dior.
I'm the only one in the room that has always said, I don't think it was an intentional homicide. I think it was an accident. And it's a cover-up of an accident. And if it's a cover-up of an accident, just come clean.
The parents have denied any involvement in the boy's disappearance. After reviewing the evidence, Klein is confident he will solve the case, and he believes he's very close.
This case is solvable. The evidence is there. This case is not only solvable, but it is staring us right in the face.
Although the case has seemingly gone cold, efforts to find Dior have been ongoing.
It is sad to see that there are a lack of voices joining together 8 years later. It's almost like people are thinking it's a cold case. It's definitely not. It's still, active, and there's a lot going on behind the scenes.
Kelly Pearson has been a helping hand in the case for a while, keeping awareness of his disappearance at the front of people's minds through fundraisers and sharing information.
We're really starting to branch out, and this is the year where we're really attacking this case. Share his face. Talk about him.
Reporting in Lehigh County, I'm Kaylee Galaviz.
You can find more about your story and coverage on this case by visiting our website at news3now.com. It has been 8 years since 2-year-old Dior Coon now.com.
صعب جدا اني انظر اليه في اليوم هكذا وانا حتى بحاول.
It has.
In July 2017, people were still waiting for answers about a missing 2-year-old named Dior, and we were too. We were there at the vigil next to Jessica and Grandpa, but Isaac and Vernal were nowhere to be seen, and the whole community was watching for clues.
I can't believe it's been 2 years. Everyone wants to know what happened to that little boy. I think as stories started changing and rumors started swirling around, the tragedy, the heartbreak then turns into that mystery and the curiosity of, well, were the parents involved? And if so, how could you do something like that? And then how could you claim that he wandered off?
My 2-year-old son. Yes, we can't find him.
I'm 99% sure he's probably deceased.
Jane Holmes worked with Private Eye Philip Klein. She's about to drop another theory that could change the entire story.
Some people have speculated that something had happened to the child before they even went on the trip to try and cover up the child's death, possibly, or an accident, or whatever may have happened.
One reason behind her hunch is a lack of photos taken by Dior's mother. The investigators say that she always posted pictures of her son on Facebook, but not during that camping trip. Did she take any pictures, by the way, at all during the camping trip?
No.
Okay. Any particular reason? Just didn't think about it?
Just when I'm camping, I don't really, I didn't have service. I wanted to relax and enjoy being camping.
Okay. At this point, Jessica says she had 2 witnesses in town that saw her with Dior. One was a store clerk. The other worked at a restaurant.
We questioned those witnesses. They never saw a child inside that. So now we have 2 witnesses saying, what are you talking about? There was no child.
I'm pretty comfortable saying he's not in this particular area right here.
Is there evidence that Dior was actually last seen at that campsite?
We believe he was.
You believe he was? What's the proof?
It just the various timelines, the testimony that we collected.
Testimony, but there's no physical proof, no photos.
Correct.
So it's the official belief of the sheriff's department that he was up there.
Yes.
How the
Are
fuck
you
did he go
investigating
missing?
any chances that maybe he wasn't?
Yes.
2 years after Dior's disappearance, his family went back out searching.
I feel like people have kind of given up on trying to help us find him. Like, this weekend made it public that we're coming up here, nobody shows up.
Do you think that's because they've turned on you, blaming you?
I think for some people, yeah.
Some people say you know something.
If I knew something, I would have spoken the first day. That's my child. I would die for him.
Dior's mother says she was offered a deal, a get-out-of-jail-free card.
I had to show them where he was. And I said, I don't know that, so I'm never signing that. And I put it back across the table and I said, get it out of my face. Because that just pisses me off. I don't know anything.
If Jessica was offered a deal,
I don't know anything.
If Jessica was offered a deal, the sheriff isn't talking. He had no comment. But what we did get was this photo of what Dior was last seen wearing. Cowboy boots, a blue shirt, and a camo jacket. And kids grow a lot from age 2 to 4. That's why the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children created this image of what Dior might look like as a 4-year-old.
I want him to come home, but 2 years later you start kind of, thinking, well, that's maybe never going to happen. And you start kind of, home, but 2 years later you start kind of, thinking, well, that's maybe never going to happen. And you start kind of accepting that in a way and saying, well, at least getting answers is better than what we're doing now.
Jessica says none of the 4 people at the campsite really talk to each other anymore. But she's still searching for the truth.
A lot of those people that have pointed the finger at me or pointed the finger at any of us, you know, are gonna kind of feel like idiots in a way. Like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have been so judged.
Yeah, 'cause that is amazing, though. How do you go missing in a situation like that?
Hello, I'm Steve. A little about myself. I'm a retired law enforcement officer with 20 years of service. I began my career in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator. During my career, my training consisted of everything from SWAT to becoming a state-certified crime scene technician. I've investigated crimes from thefts to homicides. After retiring and becoming aware of true crime and web sleuths, I started my channel for web sleuths to better understand the perspectives of law enforcement. Not only do we cover true crime, I go out to the field and assist families who have lost loved ones to homicide, and their cases are considered cold. Join me as we look and bring attention to these critical cases. Hello everyone, glad you're able to join us tonight. If you're new to the channel, thank you for being here, and we'll have a short presentation, and as you're in chat, always remember, be respectful of the families, mods, and each other. And as we have our presentation, Mr. Steve will be keeping up with chat. If you have a question about the topic, absolutely put it in there, and she will get them organized. And after the presentation, I'll answer as many as I can. And we always thank everyone for being here and supporting us. It means a lot to us as we go out and work with the cold case families that have contacted us, and we go out and look at some of these other cases. But with that being said, we'll get started here. Of course, tonight we're going to be talking about Dior Coons, who was last seen July 10th of 2015. So now we're looking at it a little over 8 years, and he went on a camping trip, as we'll discuss and look at this. If you have any information on this case at all, absolutely make sure law enforcement has all that information. Regardless if you think it's out there or not, and whatever your information is, like I said, law enforcement needs to have it.
Is that where he went missing?
Number, you need to call 911.
Oh, okay. I thought it's way out there in open front.
678 for the missing and exploited children, and we absolutely appreciate that. All right, but Dior was camping. He's a toddler, just a little bit over 2 years of age, and when he went up missing, and has never been seen for. And we'll get into some of the information tonight. There are so many theories, and there's been private investigators across that have worked this case. There's been 2 or 3 of them, and some of them are still working on it. Some were employed by the family and have since left the family due to suspicions and theories. And of course, law enforcement has looked at this case and still is looking at it for the fact that we have a child missing and has been missing for many years. And what does that mean, and where and how should we look at this, and how what steps should be taken? I haven't been contacted by the family on this case, but I do have a great interest in this case, and I will be traveling out there in, let's see, about just over 2 weeks, I think. We'll be heading out that way. I've got to work a cold case up in Indiana, and meet a couple families up there, and during Labor Day week, and then I'll be heading west, pick up Chris with the Mob Crew. If y'all don't know who Chris with the Mob Crew is, absolutely check out his channel. I'm sure, he's close to 80,000 subs, I think, now, and congrats on that. Or 70,000. It's up there anyway. He's got a lot. He's got far a larger audience than but I enjoy working with him, and I look forward to going out there, picking him up, and we're going to head on out and do some research on this first trip out to try to get not only bring some more awareness to the case, but also to get boots on the ground and see that area. Of course, you can research these cold cases, and there's a lot of information out there. You can go on Google Earth, you can see it, and get kind of an understanding of the terrain. But until you're boots on the ground and you see all the possibilities and try to understand certain facts, and not just speculation, because
I'm a subscribe.
everyone out there has an opinion about this case, and some people during these 8 years have built some pretty strong opinions. And so for me, as I start looking at this case, I'm going back to the very beginning and looking at it and what was the original 911 call, and we'll be approaching it from that, seeing, and when I travel out there to see the area and familiarize myself with it, and start checking off some of the possibilities. And it's just for my satisfaction. Of course, we're probably going to be getting all different types of comments and suggestions, which absolutely welcome them all. But I'm not going to get sidetracked or anything on my approach of how I will look at this case from the get-go and starting back at square one, and that's being the first day of this and acting as if almost I'm the first one to get there, and seeing what that terrain tells me, and what that environment out there could possibly have led to this child just simply disappearing from the face of the earth. And where could he be, and what were the circumstances that has led us to this 8 years. Of course, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children have released this age-progressed photo of what Dior would look like at the age of 4 in 2017. Now, even after that and what we have now, I've got to go. I haven't found a age progression for this one currently of what it is now, additional 6 years. But if y'all, like I said, if you have any information, absolutely make sure law enforcement has that. But the 2-year-old at that time disappeared July the 10th, 2015. He was with his parents and grandfather or great-grandfather and a friend of the great-grandfather. They were 4 adults, and there was a misunderstanding or separation of the parents, the friend, and the grandfather, and who was supposed to be watching Dior at any certain time during that confusion. And there's been a lot of stories of which way and who is responsible, and the speculation is out there of who's guilty of what possibilities they are. But like I said, we're going to take care of some of the natural of what nature can lead to as possible disappearances and what part to play in. For the fact that, of course, yes, we would always look at the individuals that were there at the time. But we're talking about a child that went missing during daylight hours when there's 4 adults, all of them awake, mobile, able to put eyes on each other, and we have a missing child. And what was the time frame for that? And is it simply something of a child becoming lost in the wilderness? And possibly. That's what led us to this. Because there's certain aspects of it that confuses me for the fact I haven't been there yet. I've got to meet with some people out there and get some first-hand information and look at some of the natural threats that can lead to a child simply disappearing. And that's what we're going to be discussing tonight. But anyway, on that fateful day, Friday, July 10th, 2015, at 2:28 p.m., Jessica, who is Dior's mother, made a 911 call reporting the child missing. That they were up there camping, and they had been searching for the child for a short period, couldn't find the child and they needed help. And of course, anytime you advise first responders that you have a missing child, of course, we come, we go. And that was the case on this. And so everyone that was available, I would assume in that region, responded, and they started a intensive search that went on for multiple days. But the search efforts, of course, always start at the ground zero of where was the child last seen, and they'll bring in resources from everything from just as many people as we can get boots on the ground as possible. And what are those first initial threats? And I've been there. That you have where you have to watch highways, roadways, because small children around those can absolutely receive certain be put in danger. We have busy highways and roads and streets and things of that nature. That wasn't the case on this campground. So you didn't have to worry about a high traffic area or a lot of people being in certain be put in danger if we have busy highways and roads and streets, things of that nature. That wasn't the case on this campground. So you didn't have to worry about a high traffic area or a lot of people being in that area. There were reports, I think by the great-grandfather that said that, yes, that there was someone fishing at the reservoir. Hasn't been, you hear reports and speculation both ways. So there's always an outside chance that it could be an abduction. But once again, we're going to look at what the natural threats are first, and then we'll progress as we look at this case in the coming days, weeks, months, whatever it takes as we look at it. But the campground was searched, and then we they brought in certain dive crews, and there's a reservoir, and my understanding is that when they brought in the canine resources, that those canines tracked to the reservoir on at least 2 occasions. And that reservoir is only a quarter mile away from that location. So you're looking, around 5 or 6 football fields, around 5 football fields away. And so could a toddler be able to cover 5 football fields in just a few minutes? Absolutely. And get up there near a reservoir. And of course we know the dangers of water. And that was in law enforcement that after we tried to seal off an area, make sure that the threats of roads and highways weren't a threat to a child, then we started looking for those water dangers. Was it a creek? Is it a river? Is it a lake? Is it a swimming pool? All of those areas are absolutely high risk and danger areas for any child, especially at that age, for the abilities of can they swim, or their curiosity of water, do they enjoy water, will they put themselves in a dangerous environment, not realizing the threat, and absolutely, and I've witnessed it of where small children have perished due to either going through an open gate and having access to a pool above ground or even in-ground pools. And like I said, from the first responder aspects of it, and we know that from this campground, which is named Timber Creek, and anything named Timber Creek has a creek, and then the reservoir. And so we have multiple dangers. We have moving water, which is even more of a threat than just stationary water. So, but anyway, the dive crews went in. Of course, the creek was searched again, and Dior was not found. Well, of course, dive teams will work multiple days and multiple times depending on clarity of the water. And when I was reading one of the articles, and I'm extremely interested in that reservoir, and there's been has it been searched? absolutely dive team went in there. But we have to look at can things be missed by dive teams? I've worked, I don't know how many cases in my career, and spent I don't know how many hundreds, if not thousands, of hours searching for victims in water, and have recovered my share of victims from water. But it's not easy when you have low visibility. And one of the articles I read, of course, the dive teams were in there, and they brought in some sonar robots, which I would imagine is probably some type of underwater submersible um, to drone type vehicles to search, and of course using sonar. And some of the technologies that are available now probably weren't available as much, or weren't as advanced in 2015 as they are now. But we'll go up there and we're going to look at this because the foggy water conditions, I've never really have heard that term, foggy water.
I'm going to give me some coffee.
our region, we use more of the term cloudy, um, you know, things like that. But like I said, each region may have on clarity of water different verbiage they use, and they use foggy. And that was in that article. I don't know if that's a term that was used by law enforcement or just by whoever was writing that article. But while the dive teams are searching the waters, of course, we have horseback crews, and I'm sure there was crews searching by foot because the terrain there is extremely hazardous and steep in certain areas. And you have to be, when we get there, there appears to be some rock slide areas in that vicinity. And of course, Chris and I will look at those also while we're there. Um, have us, the K9s and all the other crews been in there? Absolutely, I believe so. But as we always look at this stuff, we see case after case that a lot of times these victims are found um, um, weeks later, years later, in areas that have been searched multiple times. You can go throughout these missing person reports, and you'll see that it may simply be that there was a hole in the ground, a well, or a rock slide, or just a ravine or something that people had just walked by or didn't see from that angle. And often these victims, and then we have to look at even one that happened on the Tyler Rodney case in that lake where a whole vehicle that she was when she left the party, that it was searched, and that vehicle was missed by dive teams, multiple dive teams, and scuba divers, and electronics, and everything you can imagine that law enforcement.
The youth plastic problem is enormous.
Oh my God.
What do you think happened to your grandson? I don't know what happened to him, for sure. Else I would let you know. What's your guess?
We begin tonight in the bizarre case of a 2-year-old boy who mysteriously vanishes at an Idaho campground.
What's the address of your emergency?
I'm actually camping in Redwood, just outside of Redwood.
Uh-huh.
My 2-year-old son, we can't find him.
How long has he been missing?
About an hour.
An hour?
Yeah.
Are you by water?
Yes.
Do you know which campground you're in?
It's Stone Reservoir, Timber Creek.
Stone Reservoir?
Yeah, or Timber Creek.
Hold on. We need search and rescue. Jessica? Jessica?
Yeah.
What's your son's name?
Or,
Okay. What is he wearing?
he was wearing cowboy boots, a blue, pair like pajama pants, and a camel jacket. And he's got shaggy blonde hair.
Is your husband calling too?
Like, all down where we were camping at, and we can't find him at all.
Okay, we need you to stay within cell service. We've got people going on the way.
Thank you.
When officers arrived at the scene, they found all 4 adults together at the main campground area. Dior's parents, Vernal Coons and Jessica Mitchell, spoke to responding officers first. Timber Creek Campground is located in the San and Chalice National Forest, situated at the end of a rocky dirt road that took approximately 40 minutes to drive up from the nearest town. Theodore was a small town located in Lemhi County, Idaho, with a population of 105 in 2010. Next to the main campground area was a creek described as being small, about 4 to 6 feet in width and about a foot deep. That creek led directly to Stone Reservoir, a couple hundred feet south of the campground. The campground was a spot that Jessica's grandfather, Robert Walton, camped at when he was younger. Robert was one of the 4 adults present at the campground alongside his caretaker granddaughter, Jessica Mitchell, and her fiancé, Vernal Coons. Jessica and Vernal were engaged to marry with their 2-year-old son, Dior Coons. When asked, both told officers that after they went down to the creek under the impression that their son was with their grandfather, Dior vanished. Also present at the campground was Robert's friend Isaac Renwad. Isaac allegedly told officers that he was down at the creek ahead of both parents before finding out about the news. Within an hour, search and rescue was present at the scene. Over the weekend, over 200 volunteers showed up to search for Dior. Searchers focused on a 2.5-mile radius around the campground, on horseback, ATVs, foot, and in the water, including the creek that the parents went to, as well as the reservoir it led to. The reservoir was shallow, but not shallow enough for a 2-year-old, but to the luck of rescuers, the reservoir and creek did not cover too much distance, as it only stretched about a mile from the reservoir. As the week came to a close, Sheriff Bowerman of the Lemhi County Sheriff's Department stated that they were pretty certain that Dior wasn't in the creek or reservoir after diving the area multiple times. Aerial searches were also conducted with a helicopter and forward-looking infrared imaging within a 3-mile radius of the Timber Creek campsite. There was no evidence recovered of Dior being present. The Next day, as searchers looked for missing deer, Jessica and Vernal gave an interview with local East Idaho news.
All right, Dio, so take us back. Was it Friday?
I'm not sure what day it is today.
Today's Monday. It was
Friday. Friday at about 2:26 is when I, was it 2:26?
2:36 when I called.
2:36 is when she called, and I was in the truck hauling down to the road trying to get service because I didn't think one bar would get it. So she got very, very lucky. I was blessed that she was able to get service because I didn't want to try and risk getting halfway through my talking to 911 and have it cut off. So I went down to where I knew I could get a little service about a half mile down the road. We searched for, after about 20 minutes and in a dead panic, not knowing where he was in such a small area and not knowing, never being there, I knew I was in trouble. So we decided to call search and rescue, and that's when I drove down. She tried getting a signal out. As soon as I got a hold of them, they told me that she was on the other line with them, and they had our location, and they were on our way. They were amazing. They are amazing, and they still continue to be. Lehigh County Sheriff and Sam and Search and Rescue, you could not ask for a better group of people. And everybody was so emotionally attached to this, as anybody would be of a 2-year-old. He's pretty small for his age, but he moves pretty good, and that was our concern. He was right with us. Where it's at is, I mean, I thought it would be perfect to go camping there because it's enclosed by walls of mountains, and there's not much space around there that he could go. And our biggest concern was the creek, which was knee deep, a few feet wide, but he's a little guy. They finally, yesterday, we were able to put that to rest, and Lehigh County Sheriff, Sheriff Dave, and the rest of the sheriffs have put out that they assured me there is 100% chance that he is not anywhere in that water, around that water. They have torn that creek upside down and in and out. Divers have gone through wetsuits, along with the helicopter. That was the world's most advanced search and rescue helicopter. Sheriff Dave of Lehigh County, I just spoke with him on the phone this morning. He has got horseback riders and trackers up there right now, and very, very advanced professionals. I'll be going out and I've just come down to get any resource I can get to go back up today. What questions do you guys have?
Tell us a little bit about, first of all, how many that's going on. A lot of people are praying for you.
Uber's Delight is an emotional boost or thrill that some people get when they successfully cheat or deceive another person. This behavior is often triggered when the deceptive hears affirmation that their story was convincing. This does not always mean that the person is being deceptive, especially when the behavior isn't a pattern, as some may occasionally smile under traumatic reflections, specifically when thinking about the worst and best case scenarios about the subject in discussion.
Friends and family and hoping to be strong for them.
This is what's, I know, keeping me together, because if we didn't have all of our family, the minute I called my mom and she was up there in a matter of hours, and same with the rest of our family, they were just up there.
Good.
Luckily, a few phone calls is all it took at first. And this is Sheriff Davis said in the news, there was 175 plus people up there in the grid searches, volunteers, professionals, and anybody I called, the service up there is very, here, there, it's camping, you know? We're trying to hold up the best we can, but we have hope, is the thing. Hope is what keeps it going. Hope is, because the search is not over, search is not done. We will find him, no matter what. No, we both did. After 20 minutes of up and down the creek and up and around the camp, and he wasn't there, that's when I got in my pickup truck and drove down the road to try and get some service.
Especially after screaming his name, we have nicknames for him. No sound of him,
This
no
little boy,
crying.
he's a goer and a mover, but he does not go away from his parents. He was not.
Very attached to us.
Very, very unusual, sir.
And we didn't hear people around us. We didn't see anybody. We have.
That needs to be addressed. something it could be a good thing, but it can also be
That's
a
the
We just
one
don't
of the
want
walls
anything
we're going up against.
twisted.
Yeah, we don't want to twist it. So to clear up any rumors that you've seen or heard or
One thing that
We
concerns
want
me.
to get to that. What's most of the biggest rumors that are going around is, I mean, I have heard everything from why you would make a rumor that has to do with a 3-year-old is, if you're not going to help, please don't. If it's not helpful,
Yeah.
this is a 2, almost 3-year-old we're talking about. Please help us. But I've heard everything from I am a truck driver. I've heard everything from my company won't let me come home off the road to look for my son. I was there the entire time, and my employer, 4 hours after my son went missing, has been up there day and night, has not slowed down. And that one bothered me, and then they got worse and they got worse and they got worse. But that's a handful of bad with a bunch of good. The amount of support is very overwhelming, and it's good.
Are there any rumors that you've seen, like anything you want to clear up,
Somebody at the store,
Jessica is about to give an answer that, like Vernal, does not address the EMT bag in question. The EMT bag the reporter brought up was stolen from one of the search and rescue vehicles that arrived. Some at the campground claimed it could have been stolen by the abductor, while others alleged it could have been stolen for the narcotic medications it contained.
Ledor said, it was one of the ladies that had worked at the store said.
And when we haven't left the camp since 1 o'clock that afternoon, so it's just a lot of hearsay. And
was anybody camping around you?
That we don't know. I come to find I didn't know the area, and I didn't know it's very open, but you can't see much. There's a road that goes up and along the top. We're camped underneath the reservoir, basically right below it, and you can go up above the reservoir. I didn't even know the road was up there. And as I traveled up there myself, I come to find out I can see everything going on in that campsite, but you can't see out. You can't see up, you can't see around, and if anybody comes to the bottom of your campground, you can't even see who they are.
So they could have come to your
They could have came in and you couldn't never know it. And with the water it was not a fast running, it's a creek, but it is quite loud moving through the logs and things like that. So hearing range is not all that far either, so you couldn't hear anybody coming up either.
So he was just kind of playing, and you guys were doing your thing, and
He
noticed.
He was playing.
He was with my
playing with
grandfather.
Grandpa. He was getting ready for a nap. I say it was almost. By that time it was almost 2, and he usually takes his nap. He was just.
Hold on, guys.
Yeah, we decided we were going to go a little exploring. He was going to be good with Grandpa by the campfire. We weren't more than probably 50 yards away in 10 minutes. But the time I seen him to the point I figured out he was gone. And I come back up from the creek, and I've actually seen there were some things down by the little minnows that I thought he would just love. So when I come back up to get him, and I yelled over to Grandpa, where's little Dior? He immediately shocked. He says, he came up to you because it's such a small area. That's what a lot of people they don't understand is they just assume, how could you let your kid out of your sight? This area is pretty well blocked in, and you can see. There's no way you couldn't not see him in what we thought, and in just in a split second, your whole world is upside down and vanished. There's not a trace found. That's the other reason why this has been called on the news as a suspension, because it is not a suspension, but there's not a single trace of him. This child loses stuff. He's 2, almost 3. Anybody who has a child in that age range knows. They leave trails. They lose stuff. Nothing. There's just nothing. And that's where we're starting to move. Is there's a possibility that he may be with somebody, and that's what's giving us hope that it's a bad thing that he will be not with us right now, but it also means that there's a good chance that he is alive and with somebody. So we are trying every aspect we can, any aspect we can.
Is that what your gut tells you? As his
yes,
father?
As his father, I believe, and I think after being up there, and a lot of people agree with me, a lot, that he is no longer up the mountain anymore. The searching advances they used and was just very thorough for miles.
After only 4 days into the search, Vernal seems convinced that the search efforts were thorough. While a perfectly reasonable observation, The likelihood that this conclusion would have come from a parent with a missing child seems unlikely, considering parents of missing children generally seem unwilling to accept information that would deter the hopes and efforts around them to search.
Ridges on one side of you and the other, and they're not very far apart. And it was all searched, all the way down to the bottom, all the way above the reservoir. The reservoir itself, a lot of people know the place. The reservoir itself isn't but maybe a few feet deep. You can see, if you're up on top, you can see the bottom of the center. If you're looking at the middle of the reservoir, you can see the bottom of it. So everything has been 100% thoroughly checked, but nobody can guarantee me 100%, so I'm going to keep looking.
We'll continue to look until he's found. We don't care how long it takes. We think as many people that have shared the story and continue to share his pictures and things like that, if somebody has him, they'll eventually
Somebody will come forward wondering where this child has come from.
With some sort of
And
information.
that may not be the case, but it could be. So that's why we're trying to look at this aspect as well.
And you want people to keep sharing that
Yes.
photo?
Yes,
Keep
please keep sharing his photo. Please keep him in your mind, your hearts, and your prayers, and just keep your eyes open, please. Social media in general.
Oh shit, this was in
keep your eyes
Idaho?
open and keep sharing.
This is his blanket. He doesn't go anywhere without his blanket, his cup, or his monkey. And all three of them were left at the campground. And
No, all three has to be with him.
Yes.
He will trip over them if he has to, but they are going with him. And this is the first time since he's been born, pretty much, he hasn't been without these things.
And that's why
Another reason why we're wondering.
Yes, because this is the blanket that we brought him home in from the hospital. This is what comforts him in all times.
This is an exact replica of a security blanket for everybody. This is his actual blanket. He does not go anywhere without it. That's our other concern of why.
Yeah.
Should he be out there and happen to see this? What would you say?
We're looking for you, son, and we will find you. And we love you more than anything in the world. You have a lot of people who love you and are looking for you. Buddy will find you. Daddy will find you.
Looking until we get you home.
That evening, around 200 people gathered in Idaho Falls for a candlelight vigil. The parents urged others to share photos and keep a lookout for Dior. On the 17th of July, a dive team assisted with a sonar robot confirmed that there was no signs of Dior in the reservoir.
Hold on, did they find him yet?
On the 20th of July, after 10 days of searching, diving, and scouring the hillsides, the sheriff's office decided to redirect the investigation. Detectives began including the possibility that Dior was abducted by a stranger. Some members of the community, however, were skeptical of this theory, considering the remoteness and terrain of the campground. Another theory that Dior was abducted by a wild animal instead was becoming increasingly less likely. Not only would the abduction likely cause Dior to scream or be heard, the clothing he had on would have likely been ripped or fallen off, as Dior was described as wearing loose clothing, including a camo hoodie and oversized cowboy boots that his mother claimed were his favorite. The sheriff and his deputies also examined multiple wolf dens but found no clothing or sign that Dior had been dragged from the campsite. On July 20th, the FBI sent a team of investigators to assist the Lemhi County Sheriff's Office.
Where do you guys go from here?
Well, we wait until we get our report from the FBI. That's going to be critical. And we're still asking the public to help us if they have any information.
Let's go back to the beginning. Can you kind of give us a timeline as to when the family arrived?
You fucking idiot.
Well, the family, from what I understand, that we learned during the investigation, arrived the evening prior to July 10th. Sometime fairly close to dark on Thursday, July 9th. And then they went to town in Leadore, and upon returning, they supposedly thought they were turning their child over to their grandfather, the child's great-grandfather. They went down to the creek, which is right next to the campground, and within 10 to 15 minutes, they go up to find their child to show him some fish in the stream, and he's nowhere to be found. And grandfather assumes he's gone down to them because he was within their line of sight.
I'll catch you guys in a little bit.
Too far from the campground. They started their initial search and eventually called 911.
I want to do
because
some
realized they
research on
couldn't
this.
find the child.
Where was Mr. Renoir during all of this?
He was in the
Like,
same
comment,
general
subscribe. Thank you for
proximity of the
watching.
creek.
Peace
It's
out.
just over the bank.